There we go. It looks like that works. Okay, I think we'll get started if that's all right with y'all. My name is Christina Gomez. I am the finance director at the Texas Democratic Party, and I'm very happy to be here today to talk to y'all about fundraising. I have a number of slides and things to go through, so hopefully you can see the slides on your screen. Before we get started, I want to, say again how happy I am to be here. I was looking at the list of presenters on the website and the schedule, and it looks like this camp has just been a tremendous success. So I want to congratulate all the organizers and especially thank Ray, Carissa, and Lexi for helping to organize my participation in all of this. Very appreciative of this opportunity. I myself am from the Rio Grande Valley. I'm from Mission, and I love repping the 956. You should see me in our staff meetings every time we hire a new staff member who's from the Valley, or somebody from the Valley comes, is on screen because we're all on Zoom now in our staff meetings saying something. Me and the other folks who hail from South Texas throw up that Puro 956 in the chat, and it just goes wild. So I want to say I come here with an immense amount of pride for the community that I come from and some of the communities that you represent. So thank you for having me. I'm very, very happy to be here. So let's get started. Let's jump right in. I want to say I'll be monitoring the chat to see if I can answer some questions as we go along, and then I'm going to try to move through this so we can get to a question and answer session. So hopefully we can move through this pretty quickly, and then we can take questions at the end. So let's see what we got here. So what we're going to touch on today, I'm going to talk about prospecting and list building. I'm going to talk about some fundraising planning tools, digital/online fundraising, call time prep and execution, events which have been turned on their head in this pandemic, about making the ask, and I'm going to cover some compliance basics and just help provide some resources because compliance can be a little bit tricky. So let's first cover the basics of fundraising. And I want to ask y'all to type in the chat why you think people give. Why do people give to campaigns, to candidates? Let's see, there are 4 basic reasons or 4 top reasons people give. And let's see if you can guess them. You can drop it in the chat. I want to see y'all participate. Maybe I'll put some music on as you do it. It might sound garbly. So why do people give? Madison says to save on taxes. That's true. When you're giving to a nonprofit organization, you can claim those contributions as deductions on your taxes. When you give politically, those are not tax deductible. So in the nonprofit world, 100%. In the political world, not so much. So JJ Torres says, you want benefits from the state, i.e. public funded contracts. So you're building relationships. You're using donations to build relationships with candidates, campaigns that you hope to get elected, 100%. Demian, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, says people will give if they believe in a given candidate/group. Absolutely. Tied to the mission, tied to the cause, or something that really moves you and you want to participate. And one of the ways you can do that is give money. 100% people will do that. Robert says supportive ideals. Again, support of the mission, the cause. All right. So those are some really good guesses. Let's see what the top reasons people give are. So starting from the bottom up, people give because they feel like they have a moral obligation or responsibility. This is so prevalent or so easily visible in grassroots fundraising, because people who feel like this is a way I can help give $2, $3, $5, $30. You've seen it with all of the presidential candidates and all of the campaigns that have been run, in the last 8 years, 12 years, that the average donation is like around $30. It's not a whole lot larger, and there are tons of donations sourced from tons of people around the country or around the state or whatever. The people who make those contributions, that's hard-earned money, and $7 can be a lot, or $30 can be a lot for a grassroots donor, but they feel like they have a moral obligation and a responsibility to impact the candidate and the campaign, and so they make a donation. I think it was JJ who said relationships, right? So you want the rewards, the recognition, the relationship, and giving money is a way to show a candidate or a campaign that you're supportive and that you're paying attention, and certainly a way to begin to get involved. They believe in a mission / cause. I believe Robert said supportive ideals. Yeah, so like, how many of us have given to abortion rights campaigns, or, DACA campaigns, or all of the progressive issue campaigns that have been running and in need of resources to continue to run and grow, because we believe in that mission and that cause. We believe in people's capacity to represent us well in office, and we believe in somebody's platform and their ideals, and we trust them to lead with integrity. So yeah, we believe in a mission, a cause, a candidate. But the number one reason people give is because they are asked. And what does that mean? When I see that the number one reason people give is because they are asked, that tells me that all we need to do is ask, right? So it feels really simple. People give when they're asked to give. So we need to make sure, whether we're in official fundraising capacity or in anything that we're trying to accomplish, if we don't ask for what we want, we never get what we need, right? So keep that in mind. Fundraising is not magic. It is, some data analysis. It's good record keeping. It's hard work. It's tenacity. It is, doing the work. There's no magic button that you're going to be able to push that's going to raise all your money. It is about working that list. And we'll talk about list building in a second, but it's about working that list and making those phone calls and doing that follow-up and never giving up. That is how you raise money. There's no magic button. So then let's talk about what it takes to fundraise. We're not going to talk about all of these topics, but there's something good for you to write down as you think about how you organize your fundraising plans, right? And we're not going to be able to get into every single detail of a fundraising plan, but it's important to understand when you're fundraising the case. What are you fundraising for, right? This is the candidate and their platform and what they promise to bring the constituency if elected, right? Leadership. This is the kitchen cabinet. Who are the leaders who the candidate has put around them that can also be tapped to support fundraising? Who are your prospects? Who are the people that you're going to ask for money? And then the plan. In what order, at what pace, how much is it going to cost? Putting all of those pieces in a calendar and executing item by item by item, being really diligent about working your plan, writing all of that out, putting timelines. What are the SMART goals, right? SMART, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound, SMART. Putting all of those parameters around your plan to execute in that way. So like I said, we're not going to get into every single one of these topics, but we are going to touch on a few. So let's talk about prospecting, list building. You start with the candidate's network when you're building, like who do you solicit money from, right? Anybody who is running for office, one of the early things that they're going to do is they're going to sit down and they're going to write a list of every single person they know that they can outreach to ask for support in the way of donations, especially early on when they need to build, a war chest. And that's not a complicated, there's no magic to that. That's not a complicated task. It is a time-intensive task, but it's not a complicated task, right? It is literally looking at all of your email addresses in your contacts. It is looking at all of your contacts on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. It is downloading all of those lists, merging them into one master list that you use to you work that. That's what I said, work that list. You work that list in the phone calls and the mailings and the texting that you do. And you can download your friends list from Facebook, your contact list from LinkedIn. So really, you can start from those places and build a comprehensive list. Your candidate should be building from those places. And then also think about like, what are the networks that you've had that you've operated in, right? Like, do you have an alumni network that you can tap into? If you're part of a sorority or fraternity, do you have a membership list that you can tap into? Do you have like any sort of like committee lists or people that you work on if you're very involved at your church, right? Or in other progressive organizations? You have to take the time to think through who is every single person I know and have contact information for, because those will be the people that you call, the people that you invite to launch events or any events, the people that you text, the people that you fundraise from. So you have to be totally exhaustive in the building of this list. And just know that you shouldn't buy a donor list. Don't waste your money. The whole point of fundraising with your list is that the people that you put on that roster, that you put on that prospect list, are going to give because, one, we ask them, right? You're going to ask them like we just talked about, but also because they know you. Fundraising is relationship based. There might be people on that list who don't necessarily aren't super excited about you running for office or your candidate running for office, or maybe your platform, but they'll give because they know you and they support you. So you'll see a little bit of that, and you have to leverage that relationship and those relationships for fundraising. Your candidate is doing the same. So don't buy a donor list. Those are people you don't know. They don't owe you anything. They don't know you from Adam. It'll be wasted effort. It's much better to take the extra time to build out a prospect list that's full of people that you've met along your lifetime, right? Or your candidate has met along the lifetime and all the different networks that they've circulated in. Be exhaustive about the building of that list and the maintenance of that list, and you're going to see much better results. So you want to ask people in the network for a connection, coming back to who's the leadership on your campaign. Your candidate sits at the center of it. They probably have a kitchen cabinet of advisors that advise them on various matters. If you are a fundraising operative, you should be sitting down with every one of those leadership members and Rolodexing with them. What I just said that you should do in list building, pulling your Facebook list and your Instagram followers and your Facebook friends or whatever, it's called Rolodexing, right? Back in the day when there was those handheld Rolodexes, people would go through the Rolodex and write down all the information. Well, everything's digital and electronic now, so you can Rolodex with your phone. And I've literally sat with clients and candidates, and Rolodexing is pulling up your address book and going through and saying, here's all the list of all the people that I know, and here's their contact information, and we should call these people. So you want to Rolodex, prospect build, interchangeable terms, with your leadership team, with your candidate's leadership team or your leadership team if you're running for office as well. If there are powerful people in the community that you're outreaching to or that you're campaigning in, somebody whose opinion is held in high regard, somebody with a lot of wealth that could really help you fundraise, both by making a donation and connecting you to other people, but you don't have a direct line to that person, like your candidate doesn't know them or you don't know them. You want to, where it makes sense, where the relationships are, the return on that time investment will be worth it. This is somebody who's going to give you a sizable chunk of cash or connect you to some really interesting people who are going to raise a lot of money for you. Power mapping, to figure out what's your networked way of getting to that person. And we'll have some power mapping examples in a little while. And just remember, when you're pulling your list together, don't call big donors out of the blue. You want to, if you can, be introduced to them by somebody who they know, because that automatically builds a trust and a validation that you're not just some other finance director or finance assistant or candidate that's coming to them for money, but their trusted friend is introducing you because there's something that you stand for or your candidate stands for that they can align with. So to the extent that you can avoid contacting big donors out of the blue, you should, and just look for warm relationships and connections within your leadership network when you do that power mapping exercise, to find natural ways to be introduced to those bigger prospects. So this is the power mapping example. Basically, you identify your target, right? That's the person at the center of the circle. You want to map out their connections, any of the networks that you know that they're associated to, and then map out the connections of you or your candidate or whoever it is you're trying to power map for, right? And look for the things they have in common. If they went to the same university, if their kids go to the same daycare, if they go to the same church. What are the networks that they have in common that you can help find commonalities and help find ties to make natural introductions to these people? You want to determine relational power lines. Who within those networks knows your prospect and would be willing to vouch for your campaign? You want to target priority relationships. You can't do power mapping for every single person on your list. That's super time intensive. But who are those top prospects? Who are those important folks that it makes sense to take some time thinking through, how do we get to these people? And then you want to make a plan for executing that outreach because it can't happen all at once. So here's a couple of examples, and we won't spend a ton of time on here. You have on what I see as the left-hand column. I hope you see it as a left-hand column as well. And under you, it says you went to university, you're part of a Rotary Club, you're a member of a union, you go to a church, and your kids go to Sam Houston Elementary / you're part of a PTA. That's your profile. Then we have 3 big shot business owners in the community that you want to get on your side or you want to involve in your campaign. Big shot business owner number 1, he also went to your university. He's also a member of the Rotary, and his kids go to St. Anne's, and his wife's a member of the PTA. So you see there, when we look for commonalities, right? This is the exercise of this is the process of like thinking through who do I know where, and what networks can I tap. So with this particular example, big shot business owner number 1, y'all went to the same university. So do you have people in common that went to your university that could introduce you? You're a member of the Rotary Club together, right? So those memberships aren't necessarily very extensive. Is there a membership roster or the president of the Rotary Club who can like introduce you and set up a lunch with this person? Your kids don't go to the same school, so that's not an option. So you see big shot business owner 2 and 3, the ones further down the slide, have different varying profiles, and you can pick which ones you have commonalities with to draw those connections, right? So it's basically power mapping. That's it. It's pretty easy. So let's talk about, it takes time to think through all of that stuff, but execution, as long as you're diligent, should be pretty easy. Plan. So let's talk about fundraising plan. This is one of my favorite things to show people. This is what is called a table of gifts. And basically, people who think about fundraising get really intimidated by the big number. We need to raise $50,000. We need to raise $100,000. We need to raise $1 million. How are we ever going to get there? Before you get overwhelmed with the big number, remember that a big number is comprised of a lot of little numbers, right? So if you see at the bottom right-hand corner of this table, it says $1,000. This is a table of gifts. This is a giving pyramid, you might also call it, for a $1,000 goal. And what you see is a column for donors needed, a column for donors asked, a column for amount, and a column for the subtotal that calculate, because you would do this in like Excel or whatever, that totals the giving per amount level, right? So the high level points about this chart is that for every gift you need, for every contribution you need, donors needed, you probably need to talk to 2 or 3 people. 3 is the multiplier on the donors asked column. So if I need one gift of $100, I want to ask 3 people for $100 because they're not all going to give me $100. Some might give me less, but the likelihood of me getting $100 from if I ask 3 people for it is high, or it's likely, right? So if I need 4 donations of $50 times that 3 multiplier, I know that I need to ask 12 people, right? So I'm just applying that 3 multiplier to every single donor needed number. And you're going to always need fewer gifts than the folks that you are asking. So your prospect list, you'll see, according to this chart for this $1,000 goal, would need to be at least 90 people long. If you look at that last row where it says 30 donors needed, actually that's not true. 30 donors needed, so you need to times 3 ask 90 people for $5, and that's how you're going to get 150. So if you add up the 90, the 60, the 30, the 18, the 12, and the 3, that's how long your prospect list has to be at least, so that theoretically you can reach this goal. Now, does it happen like this perfectly every time? No, it does not. Of course it does not. You have to learn as you fundraise, learn as your campaign goes on, and pivot as needed. But I think what this helps us do is it helps us break down a big intimidating goal into a lot of little smaller goals and get started. And once you get started, you see that this is, there are a certain number of steps, certain things that you're going to do, and you just do them over and over and over again. You could also think about, okay, for each of these levels, if you look at the amount levels going from $100 to $5, how are we soliciting this money, right? How are we asking for this money? Maybe everybody that we're asking to give $5 and $10, we're doing it with a big email list or a big text messaging campaign. Maybe everybody that we're asking for 20 and 25, those are a different kind, a targeted email campaign where you're changing the message a little bit to be a little more personalized. And then maybe everybody that you're asking for $100, which is the largest amount on this table, is a personal phone call from the candidate, right? So as you move up the ladder in amounts, the relationship or the interaction becomes more personal, right? And that's because you have limited time in the day. Your candidate or you cannot be cannot be making a gajillion a gajillion phone calls during the day. There's other work to be done. So you think about who are the folks that we're asking for the most money, and how can we express like the sincere appreciation that they would take this meeting, that they would have this conversation, and that their contribution is super valuable. So like, let me ask my candidate to give them a call, or let me give them a call. And then the others, you're dealing in sheer volume, right? Like, how can you get the most number of asks out? Email, text messaging. If you have like a phone, folks phone banking for you that are fundraising for you, the more asks you have out there, the more money you're going to get back, right? So it almost like it's a numbers game. Fundraising is a numbers game. So if you need help thinking through a table of gifts, you shouldn't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm easy to find at the Texas Democratic Party. I'm happy to talk through any of this, but this is a basic principle and a way for you to break down a large goal into a lot of smaller goals. So I think this is a really important thing for y'all to know and to keep forever if you've never seen this before. This is a circle of benefits. And basically, you have your candidate in the center, right? In the center of the circle. And the rings outside the circle are the different sort of motivations for people being close to the candidate or making contributions to the candidate. And if you look at the little carrots that are going in from the outside of the circle in, the reason that they are carrots, the reason that they are triangular is that the further you get from the candidate, from a personal relationship with the candidate, the more time it takes to engage that constituency. And the less viable that solicitation, the less likely that solicitation is to result in a contribution. So what I mean is, if your candidate is in the center, remember we just did this prospecting, this list building. Most people in the candidate's list building are going to be personal acquaintances, and they're going to have very close connections to that candidate. It's going to feel like a very personal ask. You have to spend the least amount of time with these people because, like I said, they believe in the candidate, they support the candidate, right? So almost like it's just a matter of how much you're asking them for versus like, will they or won't they give. The closer you are to the candidate, the more likely you are to get a contribution, and the less amount of time you can spend, or you'll have to spend, convincing somebody to make that contribution. So you really hope to really build out a robust personal connections list, right? The next circle is ideology. These are folks who come to your candidate because they believe in the platform or they have a similar value set, right? You can convince them on the merits of the platform. Our candidate believes in X, Y, and Z, and so do you, and that's why you should give to support his or her election, so we can live out these, put into practice these platforms, make them into law. That's ideology. When you get to the next circle, anti-opponent, these are people who your candidate could be your pet dog and they wouldn't care. They're so anti-opponent that they would support anybody running in this office. And I think a good example of this is Beto's Senate race in 2018. I was living in California, and I had so many friends who were so anti-Ted Cruz that it didn't matter who was running for that Senate seat. They wanted to support that candidate. The O'Rourke campaign did an amazing job of showing the differences between Beto and Ted Cruz and really vilifying Ted Cruz and sort of saying, like, for the sake of just getting Ted Cruz out of office, you should support Beto O'Rourke. Now, people had, more entrenched beliefs and deeper value-based beliefs for supporting Beto. That's sort of a good example. So many folks across the country, and you saw donations flow in from all states, were so anti-Ted Cruz that they were willing to support the Beto O'Rourke campaign. And then, of course, they got to know him, and it was wonderful, and we all wish he would have won. And then if you look at the last circle, the last ring in the circle is power. So these are people who come to your campaign because they seek access to power, because they have legislation they want to push, they have issues they want to discuss. They want to get in good with your candidate in the event that that candidate wins office, and they can come back to them and say, hey, I supported your campaign. Will you take a few minutes to listen to, what I'm concerned about and help me make this change? So those people take a lot of work, right? Because they're not necessarily in it for the mission or the cause. They have their own motives to helping your candidate win. So the more people you can get at the center closest to your candidate to contribute, the more efficient your work is going to be. And you're going to have to move beyond the first circle, beyond the first ring, but just know, to the extent that you can pack those lists at the inner circles, your campaign will be more efficient. So just know these different motivations for people getting involved. Lexi, and if you want to give me like a time check in the chat to help me move along, that's fine. I want to make sure we have time for like questions, and I may have a ton of slides. So let's power through this. Online fundraising. So digital fundraising basics. It's about volume. You should always, always, always be asking for money. Your frequency depends on how you calendar, right? Like, are you emailing people fundraising solicitations 3 times a week? What do each of those solicitations ask for? So there are certain alignments that you can make, different important moments in the campaign. You want to plan a schedule so that a schedule guides you, but also be prepared to turn on a dime, right? Like to make quick pivots. If your candidate has a great day in the press and they have this amazing headline and people are really paying attention, you want to leverage that moment immediately for fundraising. Throw that press release, throw that media clip on your ActBlue page or however else you're fundraising, and send it out to your whole list saying, candidates said this amazing thing or really stood up for X, Y, and Z. Support their campaign with a donation of $7, $10, $12, right? Think about a master calendar, be prepared to pivot. People are more likely to give on paydays, so to consider that. They're feeling a little rich on payday because they have that extra influx of cash and you want to get them when they're feeling generous. You want to personalize email requests. So that means it doesn't say dear friend, it says dear Amanda, right? And it doesn't say, to the extent that you can personalize the request based on the person's giving, that's going to be really effective, right? So I'm looking at Amanda Garcia here in the chat. If Amanda Garcia has a history of making political gifts, because you can find all of Amanda's giving, hi Amanda, all of Amanda's giving on the Texas Ethics Texas Ethics website or the FEC website, because political donations are public. You can do a search for Amanda Garcia. That's probably going to be a pretty common name, so hopefully you have some more information about her that you can isolate that specific record. But you're going to see to every single candidate Amanda gives, and maybe you see when you're looking at the report that Amanda has never made a donation larger than $20. So maybe sending Amanda an email asking her for a donation of $100 isn't a smart idea, because there's no record of her having that large a contribution. So you want to get Amanda started with a request that she's used to making and develop a relationship with her before you ask her for a larger amount, right? However, if you're looking at that report and you're seeing, holy moly, Amanda gave $100 every month, so by the end of the year she was giving $1,200 to such and such candidate, that might be a signal to you that this is a person you should get to know, your candidate should call and develop a relationship with, especially if she's already on the prospect list, right? Because you can have a more robust, you can have a conversation and ask for a higher amount of money off the bat. But dealing with digital fundraising, you want to customize those solicitations based on that donor history, and you collect all of that information from the Texas Ethics Commission and the FEC. All of that information is public. You want to be constantly building your lists for digital fundraising. The larger your lists, the more flexibility you have to send out a ton of fundraising emails, because some people will unsubscribe, but if your list is continuously growing, then the net gain is positive, right? Because you're gaining more people and gaining donations at a faster clip than the people who are exiting your list. So you always want to keep building your list. And the way you do that is pretty intuitive, right? Like you're sending out surveys, collecting contact information, you're putting out registration forms for events, especially now that you're doing them online. You want to have everybody's information beforehand to register for the event, and you're adding that to your email list. Basically, any opportunity you can take to collect contact information, you should, because you're building your email list. And then you can sign up for ActBlue trainings. You see most people doing donations through ActBlue. ActBlue, if you don't know, is a platform dedicated to helping progressives raise money. You won't see any conservatives on that platform. And they're, I think, technically a nonprofit, and most people do their digital fundraising through them. And they offer a wide variety of trainings that really get into like how you word things and how you format things and what things should look like based on their experience, what has the highest return. And all of those trainings are wonderful. So let's talk about call time. Call time is really important. So call time is the time you take to make donor phone calls. And it is probably one of the harder things to do. One, because like our schedules get nuts, right? And if we don't have a dedicated time to call time, then it never happens. So number one, schedule call time. Make it sacrosanct. You cannot move call time, hell or high water. Like there has to be something really serious happening for you to walk away from call time, or for you to let your candidate walk away from call time. You want to do all of the prep work before call time happens, right? Call time is not the time to research your folks or to look up phone numbers. All of that information is prepared. It's either on a spreadsheet or in one of the many fundraising apps, call time apps that exist that your candidate can use or you can use to do call time. All of that prep work is done beforehand. So the only thing you or your candidate is doing during call time is picking up the phone, dialing numbers, using the script, and raising money, right? All of the information all of the research should be done beforehand. You want to make sure that you have a quiet, dedicated space free from distraction. And that's important for a couple reasons. One, it helps keep you or your candidate focused. And you can just like bang out calls, right? Just go boom, 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 one call after the other. It's also important because sometimes call time can feel so miserable that people will look for any excuse to be distracted and not do it. So don't have anything anywhere, like no excuse to distract people from the task at hand, the very important task of doing call time. And you want to warm up, like with anything else. Write a script, right? Make sure your candidate is prepared with the points of that script. Have them practice saying those words, become familiar with the message that we're using on that day. You don't want anybody to like pick up the phone, call somebody, and read something verbatim and sound like a robot, right? Like the practice of preparing a script is to think through what exactly it is you are trying to achieve. So what are the right words to use? And then to get your candidate using that, or you using that in a way that feels most natural, right? Using the words that feel most natural to you. And with a little bit, after the first couple calls, you'll find a rhythm, and then you can just get going. So make sure to warm up for call time. What you need. So we talked about all of these things, right? So you need a call sheet. You need to have a phone charged. You probably should have a couple phones so you can like switch between people who are processing gifts to give your candidate the next phone call to make, so they're only making phone calls. And you want to be tracking calls. So maybe in the spreadsheet that you give your candidate, you are also tracking that same information with them live. That's called being a call time manager, right? You're sitting with the candidate. They're making the phone calls, maybe with a list you put in front of them, but you have that same list and you're noting like what is happening. Like called Lexi Garcia, left a voicemail. Called Amanda Garcia, connected, donated $20, right? Like, or whatever it was. It's important to keep those records because you're constantly pulling call lists, and you want to know, when was the last time we called this person? How much did we ask for? What was the conversation like? Did they hang up on us? Did they not hang up on us? Do we have a bad phone number, right? So like, let's say your candidate calls JJ, who was chatting earlier. We don't have a good phone number for JJ. Don't put JJ back on the call list until you have a good phone number. And the only way you're going to remember that you don't have a good phone number for JJ is if you mark it in that call sheet. Wrong number, bad number, right? So tracking all of that information is really important. And with everything else, learn what works, right? You want to pivot as much as you need. If you found that your candidate or you don't do well doing call time at like 2 o'clock on a Monday, then schedule another time, right? Or if you found that your candidate or you had the most success reaching people instead of just like leaving voicemails at like 9 o'clock in the morning on a Wednesday, then schedule 9 o'clock in the morning on a Wednesday. Thank you, Lexi. I see that, for the call time. So you want to take notes of all of that and pivot as needed. Event planning we're going to fly through because let's be honest, event planning has totally changed since the pandemic. I'm pretty sure you'll get these slides. Lexi, you can confirm if folks are going to get these slides. But with everything else, you want to think about what is the goal of your event? What are you trying to do? How much money are you trying to raise? How many people are you trying to get in the room? You want to design a meaningful program that is, that has nowadays, I think, fewer speakers because it's so painful to sit in front of a Zoom for like 3 hours and just listen to speaker after speaker after speaker after speaker. In person, you should remember this for future. Expect a 30% attrition rate. And what that means is 30% of the people who say they're going to come to your event will not show up for your event. So when you think about budget and planning for food, you plan to have 30% of your RSVPs not show up. So tracking and managing data as it relates to event planning. Oh, that's not right. But anyway, you want to use events to meet new potential donors, raise money, and build excitement. Now we have to do like digital, everything like register online, which is actually sort of helpful, really helpful in collecting information of people and easy to follow up because you can throw that information into a call list, throw that information into an email list, and just be on your way. Do what's right for your community, I think, is a good point to talk about, like the pivoting, right? If we were in person, what fits your community? I'm from the Valley. There are barbecue, you can buy barbecue plates like every weekend, and I really miss that. But somebody was already always raising money by selling barbecue plates. Hey, if that works in your community and it's a fun community builder and a fun way to get like your candidate out in the community, do it, right? But like if you're in the middle of a pandemic and nobody is being advised to like come into contact with anybody, maybe a big fundraiser like in person with a buffet of food isn't like the best idea. So you need to like pivot to make sure that what you're planning suits your community. So just be flexible. Tips for a great event. You want to fill the space. So whether it's a physical space or a Zoom space, with friends, right? With people who are supportive of the campaigns, people who are coming to support the candidate, people who are coming to get to know the candidate. And when we're doing everything on Zoom now, this is where the pre-registration becomes so important because you can, on the back end, monitor who shows up to these events and avoid having like a Zoom bomber situation where somebody shows up just to cause havoc and just to make a mess of the situation. So that pre-registration actually helps you on the security end for the Zoom events. Make sure that folks leave understanding the point of their being there. Like, what were they there to learn? The party has been hosting, the Texas Democratic Party has been hosting a number of briefings based on our plan to flip the state house and focused on our data program and, voter expansion efforts or voter protection efforts. What are the key points that we need people walking away from? If you're hosting an event with your candidate, what is it that you want folks walking away from knowing about your candidate? And what are you asking them to do? We want a very clear ask. Are you asking for money? Are you asking them to do phone banking? What is it that you're asking them to do? You have to be very clear about that. In person, I feel like my dogs are going to start barking, so I apologize for that in advance, just in case they get a little fuzzy. But you want to circulate sign-in sheets in an in-person event. Hopefully online you have collected all of that information beforehand. And when they're registering to sign into the event, you can hopefully collect all of that information and add all of those people to your email list. You want to do an immediate follow-up, after the event. Thank you for attending. Here are the slides that we used if you want to share slides. We're so appreciative of your support. This is what we need right now. We need volunteers to phone bank. We need to raise $5,000 before Friday. Will you help us with a donation of $100, right? Like customize that outreach. You see that fundraising is an exercise in being super organized and like managing a ton of different data. So that's really like the key. So let's talk about making an ask. For when you're preparing to make an ask, you want to do your research about who you're talking to. You want to make a personal connection. What's the commonality? What's the connection that you can make? You want to be concise. Don't ramble. And you want to make a hard ask and then be quiet. And I think the making the hard ask and the being concise is probably the hardest thing for people to do because they get nervous, right? So they just start talking. Practice your script. Practice what you're going to say. And then when you're meeting with somebody or on the phone with somebody, say what you need to say, make the solicitation, and then be quiet. Don't be the first person after you've made the ask to speak. Give the person time to consider what you have asked of them. So I might be on the phone and I might say, hey, Lexi, this is Christina Gomez calling from the Texas Democrats. How are you? Lexi would tell me how she's doing. She's doing great. And I would say, as you know, we're running this huge Black voter outreach program, and it's going to cost us $200,000 to reach every single Black voter in Texas. I know that you are an advocate of voter expansion, and getting the vote out is really important to you. Lexi, will you give $20 to help us fulfill this program? And Lexi Lexi's like,
I don't really know right now if that's like in my budget. I do really care about this.
I totally understand. Is something like a $10 donation more within your budget right now?
Yeah, that's probably something I could swing at this point.
Great, I'm so happy to hear. Okay, so y'all saw that she said no to my 20, but I didn't say, oh, okay, and hang up, right? I also didn't give her an out, like, oh, it's okay, we'll call you later. I lowered the amount. and just asked her for a lower amount. Now, if Lexi would have said, no, I also really can't do $10, the next question or the next thing I would have said was, is there another amount that is better for you right now? And sort of gives her the flexibility to determine how much she wants to give, but I'm not letting her off the phone until I try to get like a commitment from her. Now, if your candidate was making this phone call and Lexi would have said, yeah, I'll give $20, as the candidate, I would have said, Lexi, I'm so thankful. Thank you for that. I'm going to give you to my finance assistant, and she's going to process your gift on ActBlue right now. Her name is Amanda. Amanda, you're getting a lot of attention today. Her name is Amanda, and she's going to help you process that gift. Thank you so much. And then your candidate would hand the phone to Amanda, pick up another phone, and make the next phone call. Amanda, with the donor, would say, Lexi, thank you so much for making this contribution. I can process this with you online on ActBlue right now. And Lexi might say, sure, and you can do that, pull up the ActBlue link, do it all online. Or she might say, oh, I'm actually not ready to do it right now. I, as a finance assistant, would say, totally understand. The email address I have for you on file is X. How about I send you the information and the link so you can make a contribution online? Now, you want to avoid that because the likelihood that Amanda gets to her email or Lexi gets to her email you're going to have to wait, right? And she might forget. And then maybe she was lying to you on the phone that $10 is actually not a good amount for her. She was just trying to save face, right? So once you lose the opportunity to process the donation on in person in that moment, the likelihood of you closing that contribution drops by the minute, right? So you want to try to process as many gifts in that moment as possible, which is why you never want your candidate alone doing call time. There needs to be a call time manager that can help process those gifts, maybe one or two people, right? One person who's always taking notes, another person who's processing gifts if you have the staff to afford that sort of setup. Okay, let's see what else we got here. How to close. You want to say thank you, ask how they would prefer to contribute, ask for a credit. Oh, again, trying to process the gift in person. And, in my call to Lexi, I told her, we're trying to raise, what did I say? We're trying to raise $200,000 or $5,000 by the end of the week. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's not true. But I manufactured a deadline and I manufactured a timeline, right, to create the sense of urgency to help push Lexi toward the donation, right? So maybe the fundraising goal for the campaign is $20,000 that week, right? And this particular call time goal is $5,000. So I can say to Lexi, we're trying to raise $5,000 in the next couple hours to support X, Y, and Z, right? Will you help us? And then you want to follow up with those folks because you're tracking all of this information and you know who said yes and who said no and who said how much. You can check your ActBlue reports and they'll tell you, okay, of the people who you sent emails to because you did not process that donation in real time, these are the people who have given. So you would send thank you notes to all of them. And the folks who haven't given would receive an email, a follow-up email, right? A follow-up phone call by the staff assistants, by the finance assistants. I know that you and Beto talked a couple weeks ago. He's really appreciative of your support at the $500 level. I noticed that you haven't been able to process that donation on ActBlue, so I wanted to call and see if there was anything I could do to help. Your contribution, your support is very important, right? Now, if your campaign is small, the likelihood that you'll have time to do all of that follow-up is really nil, right? I'm thinking we have people, we have staff, we have money, we have time. If that's not possible, it's not possible. If you have to do a mass email follow-up and just blind copy everybody that hasn't made their contribution yet, then that's what you have to do. But you want to find a way to follow up with people. Don't leave any money on the table. So remember, don't give up, be tenacious. Don't take it personally. And this is something that you really have to internalize. You are not fundraising to line your own pockets. You are fundraising because you believe in a candidate, because you believe in a mission, because you believe in a platform, because you believe that just change in this office is going to bring about something really important. So don't take it personally. It's not about you. You have far too many phone calls to make to worry about this one person. Don't let it keep you up at night. Just be resilient. Don't give donors a way out. When you make the ask, be quiet, don't make any excuses, and don't be rude. Be polite always, right? So, oh, Lexi did the practice. Good job, Lexi. You heard her live and in person. Compliance basics. So I'm sorry if you feel like gypped. I'm not going to go into great detail about compliance, and here's why. I am not a compliance expert. Lawyers are compliance experts. When you're on a campaign, you want to make sure to have a compliance expert on your team, somebody who has worked in law is probably the most likely. What you see before you are some of the rules related to statewide compliance. The whole guide can be found on the Texas Ethics Commission website. What you see before you now, the federal, is some compliance guidelines for federal fundraising, right? So U.S. Senate, President, state level is the one we just saw. And then there's another one for judicial candidates. These are some preliminary points of guidance. And the big sort of takeaways are keep records of everything. Be truthful about what you're reporting. Collect name, employer occupation, amount, address, all of that information, and then report on time. Underline, 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 report online. Because even if your report is incorrect, you can go back and correct it, but you will be fined if your reports are late. So if nothing else, turn your reports in on time and then go back and amend them. What you see before you are contribution limits for the 1920 federal elections. This is how much people can give to federal elections, and an important piece of compliance because it tells you what the limits are and what's the maximum amount you can accept from any one person. Things to remember, and then we'll go into like 5 minutes of questions, I think. People give to people. The more asks you have out, the more you get in. Don't take it personally. If you don't ask, somebody else for sure will ask. So don't give up that opportunity. Don't make decisions for other people. Let people decide what they want to give. Like, don't give them the easy way out. People are big girls and boys. They can make their own decisions. And in the craziness of campaign, when there's a million things happening, there's going to be a million distractions. Always ask yourself, what did I do to raise money today? And if you can't answer that question, then you need to reassess your task priorities. Okay, so Flash, any questions that I can answer in the last couple minutes that we have together?
I have a question.
Yes.
What have you is it the fundraiser, the finance person's responsibility to take someone off of like automatic donations if they reach their limit?
Yeah, absolutely. If you can, I mean, it depends how big your staff is, right? Some of that work can be pretty tedious. So if you have a larger staff, you can assign it to somebody else. But yeah, you need to be watching. You need to, one, know what the limits are, and then be watching your recurring contributions so that when somebody reaches that limit, you can cancel the contribution because you can't accept anymore. So I think the limits for the Senate race were $2,800 in the primary and $2,800 in the general. So Betcha's campaign before the primary, if you reach $2,800, would have to refund you any money over $2,800, and then in the general, the same is true, right? So yeah. Other questions? We have 3 minutes left, I'm told. Cool. Well, I know this was a ton of information and really just scratching the surface. Things are getting really wild with the election less than 90-something days away. It's getting super crazy. So I can't promise you that I'll be immediately responsive if you send me an email, but I think it's important that our communities of young activists and young operatives reach out and learn from each other, and especially in communities of color, just know that I am a proponent of of advancement and of building these networks and learning from each other and helping each other. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me. It might take a little bit for me to get back to you, but I'm eager to hear from anyone who asks a question and happy to set up something on the back end of this again if we wanted to dive a little bit deeper into fundraising or do more like one-on-one practices or anything like that. So thank y'all and good luck on the rest of your trainings. And I know that I'll see you somewhere because I see so many familiar names in the chat that we'll come across each other at one point or another, which is an important professional reminder. You never know who you're talking to in terms of like after this campaign is over. I don't know what campaign you're going to be on. I don't know when I'm going to see you again. So treat everybody with kindness and respect and be professional. So because you don't know when you'll be working with them or when you'll be seeing them again, and you might be in a position to help them and they might be in a position to help you. So in terms of building your professional network, make sure to always be professional, polite, kind, gracious, all of those good things. Alrighty, I think that's it. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
All right. Final session is a break, and then we will head into other trainings. Bye-bye.